This video is brought to you by BTI Institute, a New Jersey leader in certification-based management training.
For Warren Buffett. And so I thought about it and I said, gosh, anything I possibly could ask him, he would probably say, hey, you read my book, right? It's already in there. And I kind of froze up and I couldn't think of anything to ask him. And I just shook his hand and said hi. And that's my Warren Buffett story. Extremely underwhelming. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. So today is my anniversary, wedding anniversary, second wedding anniversary. And of course, 3 months ago, Bob asked me, Matt, is this date fine for you? And of course I said, yeah, well, I have nothing going on February 23rd. What do I know? And sure enough, my wife let me know about it this morning, about scheduling meetings. And especially since I'm one of those that day in, day out, I'm either doing talks or joining co-hosting, always doing milling around the work management community. So serves me right. And I'll hear about it tonight as well. And let me minimize this menu. Can you guys see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is my beautiful family, my son, my wife. And I still think that I'm a bowler, although I stopped playing basketball about 20 years ago, but I identify. Once in a while, since I'm deep into the Midwest, I can get away with being an Eastern European cowboy, but I'm a Bulgarian, born and raised. So working for a New York entity, pretending I'm a cowboy, basketball, a wild, crazy mix out here. But I'm happy that I'm with you guys tonight. Advance my slides. My clicker is not working. So I occasionally in big meetings like this, I run into people in the community that like tchotchkes, like flashing colors. So these are my colors. For a while, I was a certification junkie, very biased towards agile agility and the agile community, but I'm very close to PMI as well, local chapter member. I have done several talks, and at least once every couple of years I'll volunteer and I'll do stuff for PMI because it's a very resourceful organization, and I enjoy working with the people. Some of the sharpest people that I know are PMI folks. So shout out to all of you guys finding time for us tonight. Where exactly do I work? Mostly fintech. Worked my way through the insurance circuit and somehow found myself in the banking sector. So I work for both the most widely recognized banking institution in the world, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And I also worked for Fiserv, which is the biggest non-bank affiliated fintech out there. Anybody from the Fed, Fiserv Deluxe on the call? I see some heads shaking, but I'm being careful also with the pulse. With 79 people, I don't think I've done anything recently with that big of a crowd. 80, going on 80 now. Excellent. So what do we need to add here to make this talk successful? And I'm gonna have you guys take, don't overthink it. Think about 5-10 seconds. What are you here to learn? When you saw BART and when you saw me being introduced as a host and whatever Bob and John introduced this talk, what came up for you? What are you guys here to learn? Let's find out. Take about 5 seconds and just throw it in the chat. And I'm curious, and it will help me steer my talk as we're going along across this. Okay.
I'm seeing a lot of BART.
I love it. Somebody mentioned a BART is a new way to do RACI. I didn't think of it this way, but let's find out. Let's have a discussion. Okay. Techniques, watchouts, applications. Okay, I see a lot of BARTs. Things are slowing down, so by all means, throw it in there into the chat as you get a chance. And I'm going to start moving us along. Have you ever been called touchy-feely? Or maybe made fun of, smirked at because of one practice or another with a heavy focus on people? I come from the agile coach background, and we're frequently taken on and sometimes justified as clowns, but we sometimes take it even further and we go very touchy-feely, into the touchy-feely area. So how many of you have the confidence that you're using the same people-focused practices used by the CIA, FBI, military intelligence, and others among some of the most intense people on the planet? Do you think they get made fun of when they use touchy-feely skills? Why should we put up with it then, for those of us who sometimes get put on the spot for being, oh, they don't talk about it. I like it, Jim. I see that comment, and I'm building this up here for my talk, because this is the main client for the technique that I'm about to show you. It is very deep. It is touchy-feely. It's emotional. It has a lot about cognitive, subconscious behaviors, and all that stuff that when people start talking about, most of us go la 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 la, a bunch of psychology stuff. But at the same time, these alphabet soup letter agencies, some of the most intense people that I see in the group relations conferences come from these agencies. So it's a weird mix of psychologists, a few agilists occasionally, and I see a lot of the CIA and FBI types in there. So as I was tossing and turning at night, wondering what thing might interest you, as Bob reached out to me, well, at least the thing which many of you have dabbled it but have not beat to death. If I came and talked to you about what I'm passionate about, it'll be like browsing coaching posts on LinkedIn. So I'm not sure if this crowd will be all crazy about some deep coaching topic that Matt is passionate about. But even with my pontification twist, my professional life coaching and agile coaching passions are also very common in the marketplace. And then it hit me. Group relations. When I go to group relations, known as GR for short, events for every 20, for about, I don't know, 20-ish people, there's always at least one more agilist, maybe two. But like I mentioned earlier, these events contain a lot of intense people. So let's delve in and find out what's the common denominator, why the touchy-feely and why the intensity come together. So when you hear group relations, I'm sure some of you thought, Matt, are we hearing you right? Group relations? And before I delved into GR, when somebody said group relations, this is what I thought. I'm a Friends fan. I thought something along this, a lot of kumbaya, all of us getting together. Then I read a little bit of family psychology because it helps me with coaching. And GR sounds a lot like the family roles within the family. No, not this type of group relationships. And although family relationships is a branch of psychology, has a lot of lessons about what makes teams tick, GR has different roots and focuses on different things. A little bit of history. We're not going to dabble too much, although this is fascinating. If you're kind of hitting a slump, and if you're like me, I go into an area of work management, whether I'm delving into, I don't know, Toyota production system or Deming, and I go deep. I'll go deep for a little while, and then I'll get a little saturated, and then I'll get thirsty and hungry to find something else that keeps me going. So Experiencing Groups is one of those books, and I have a picture of it here, and it's widely available on Amazon if you find it. It's written by the originator of group relations, mini branch of psychology called Wilfred Bion. Bion suggested that all groups have a subconscious emotional drive that affects their every thought and action, and that it's all determined by the group's beliefs about who or what will save us from this mess. And so he termed these beliefs basic assumption groups. And the very last time I did this talk, I said these very lines, And people are like, Matt, I have no idea what you're talking about. It just sounds like a lot of psychology mumbo jumbo. How am I going to relate with it in my project management or agile world? And so here it is. Group relations is basically Bion in the late 1800s came back from the Boer War in South Africa, and he was placed in a hospital in England that was working with vets, soldiers basically returning from the war, and they were injured soldiers, and he had tons of time to observe behavior as all these brand new soldiers that hadn't previously worked with each other, or some of them knew each other, but most of them didn't before, how they were interacting. And he was basically a fly on the wall. And as time progressed, he started seeing patterns of behavior emerging with the soldiers. And these soldiers had all the time in the world to interact and talk about a whole lot of nothing, some meaningful topics, but it was very lightweight, and they had plenty of kind of semi-informal conferences where a bunch of them were hanging out together in a group. And so Bion tagged some of these patterns and behaviors that started emerging in groups. And why do we care about this? Because just about everything, look around you in your office, in your living room, very few things around you are made by individuals. I bet you anything, 90% of the things around you are made by teams. And so when we talk about teams, before teams get together, they're groups. And groups and teams, I'm not going to go the group versus teams, classic differentiation, but groups themselves, there's a lot more subconscious things going on that come up on the surface. And so why GR is important and why the alphabet letter agencies are using them is because with careful observation and with very little interference, if the right conditions are created, we can put a bunch of people together and some amazing subconscious things will start coming to the surface. And certain patterns, if you know what to look for and what to press at, and they're facilitated right, you can get a lot of information and really figure out what gets people going, what triggers them, and you can find things like leadership, informal leadership, and a lot deeper things can come up. And this is why I love this, because it's one of the most well hidden gems into work management of all types. It ties into project management. It's agnostic to agility and lean and all the methods out there. And this is why I love it, because you can apply this to everything. So you might say, Matt, is the book all I know? Is this where it's at? Do I need to go read the book? And it's written, you can tell it's written last century. It has quite a few articles. But if you really want to experience this, there are two places out there. One is in Western Europe. I believe it's in London. It's the Tavistock Institute. A lot of people will call it endearingly Tavi that are deep into this. On the US side, there's the ACRI, AKRI. It's better known as the Rice Institute. And I'm just curious, amongst all of you today, can you guys throw in the chat who has heard of the Tavistock or ACRI? Almost every time I give this talk, I have at least one person who has heard of these institutions. So, okay, I see Larry. Somebody says no. Okay, somebody's heard of Rice. So Rice, Rice and Tavistock are nonprofits or semi-nonprofits or maybe even trade organizations, and they organize these events that circle around psychology. And so group relations is just one of the flavors of cognitive psychology that they have made approachable to people like you and me. And I created quite a stir when I did this talk last time. I did it for at the beginning of this week for an Austin Agile group, and there were a couple of people that were part of the Tavistock and ACRI community, and they called me out and they said, Matt, why are you making this available to people? When you go to these group relations conferences, one of the first things they tell you is that they don't provide psychological help. A lot of the work is very deep, and not everybody is meant or prepared to go out there and kind of withstand that these deep connections and these kind of weird conversations that need to happen. And there's no interrogation, there's no dark magic, nothing like that. But staying there for hours and hours upon days as a group and making deep observations over time, kind of, it is a little bit of a grind. The very first time I went, I had no idea what to expect, although I was very equipped, and I was told by several on what to expect. So I had a little bit of preparation and kind of mentally prepared myself that I'll be kind of draining think tanks, right? Somebody says, Scott Klein. Yeah, yeah. They do tons of research. I know that they churn, they publish papers. I know they do conferences, and they do a lot of classes. And this is how I got acquainted with group relations and BART, really. And Scott says, yeah, he's heard of Rice. Dan, never heard of him. So this is where I really got in trouble last time, because I explained what a GR conference is, and I made it sound as if anybody out there in the project management and agile community just come grab their team and go there, go to a conference or two and kind of withstand it and learn a lot from it. Not as much. Most people out there are not prepared to go out there and do this kind of level of sitting around seemingly talking about nothing and spending the time and being willing to self-examine to that degree. So do I recommend it? Do I not recommend it? I recommend you start with something like BART. And as you go into a deeper journey on working with yourself, maybe you attend one or two when you feel like you're equipped with these before you even start bringing other people. And I really did get in trouble because one guy said, oh, great, I'm just going to take my Scrum team and take them to one of these conferences and it's going to help us become better teammates. I wouldn't recommend that. And I strongly caution, and these type of conferences are, there literally is a disclaimer out there that says that we don't have psychological help. So if you proceed with caution. In a minute, I'm going to introduce BART. BART is harmless. BART is basically a split off of group relations conferences, and it's something that anybody can use lightly. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of context and show you that it's solid science. It's been out there for easily 100 years. And it keeps developing and great results are made. I don't think the CIA and the FBI are just throwing their money out there left and right just for nothing. So the US group relations conferences, often termed Tavistock conferences, have been held since the 60s. It's a method of learning. Basically, it's the subconscious. Some things just swim up and the facilitators and the group is knowledgeable enough on what to look for. And when I did this in Austin, somebody who's a lot more experienced and has gone to a ton more conferences, I've gotten to 3, maybe 4 conferences out there. We got to the point where we kept explaining and explaining and explaining. And some things, like I'm an Agile guy, I can explain to you Agile in 5 minutes, but mastering it, that thing is so tricky to master. A lot of you guys know. This is quite the opposite. You just can't explain group relations conferences. You have to experience them. And that's why I'm so grateful for BART that I'm about to introduce, because BART is so easy to grasp. Anybody, I can explain to you in 5 minutes. And unlike Agile, you can run around and do tons of stuff with it and reference it and be successful. And it's an overlay thing. So you don't have to be Agile. You don't have to be project management. You can use it down the street. You can use it at your small business. You can use it anywhere and solve problems with it. Any questions coming up for you guys so far? Anybody burnouts? And I see the numbers keep climbing, so I'm encouraged that you guys are curious about this cabal secret thing that's been around for 100 years and nobody knows about it. Scott's laughing about it because he knows it's not cabal. He's heard of Rice. I'm looking at the chat. I'm not seeing any. But I see a lot of curious faces, so I'm going to keep going. I'm going to give credit to John Jorgensen. John Jorgensen pulled me in. I kind of was looking to add more feathers to my hat and more skills. I'm an Agile coach, and I got... somebody's watching Blacklist. Oh, Scott. Scott's watching Blacklist. All right, Scott. We'll share some Netflix cues in a little bit. Um, so going to professional coaching or life coaching is what enhanced my agile coaching quite a bit. I became a much better active listener. I could I could partner with people a lot better. I understood the mechanics of executive coaching and how to coach teams, truly coach them. Uh, and it still seemed like something else was missing. And then my friend Jordan Jorgensen, maybe a lot of you guys know him. He's a staple in the work management community. Uh, an open space expert. He introduced me to GR, and he piqued my curiosity, and that's how I discovered. That's how I discovered and fell into BART. Oh, sorry, I'm a little bit behind here on my slides. So this is my friend John Jorgensen. So let's look at the intersection between group relations and agile. I always find something I missed before when I reread the rapidly aging coaching agile teams. But sometime ago, I hit a gold mine. So Lisa, who is fantastic, she has a bunch of different areas that she recommends for anybody who gets into agile coaching to follow, and I love it. I love all the areas. Her and Michael Spade came up with what's called, gosh, I'm drawing a blank, but it's basically a diagram that has, it's like a circle that has all the different skills, technical skills, coaching skills, mentoring, a bunch
Integral
of
Agile,
areas. Go ahead, Bob.
Integral Agile.
Yes, the integral agile wheel. And so I dare to say that BART is one thing that can be added on there because it's so different and it's so simple. And I know that a bunch of people in the community have dabbled with it. For some reason, it kind of BART gets incorporated into other things, or sometimes even gets resold under other themes. And we don't see it as much kind of coming from the source. Um, and that's why I kind of want to get you guys a little bit, um, instead of diving directly into BART, I want to pose a problem to you guys. So you have 3 minutes to think about this. I know this might have a lot of kind of visceral reactions because it's a very common question in the community. And as I was preparing for this talk, I wanted to find out a question that both gets you guys going a little bit, maybe some of you, and it's a simple one to answer, or so we think on the surface. And I'm just curious. Let's take however long it takes you. Maybe you can read this and answer it right away. Let's give it about 3 minutes, and please throw your answer in the chat. You don't have to be right or wrong. We're not going to discuss this on merit. We're going to just look at the mechanics of figuring out how to answer this. So whatever comes to mind, throw it in the chat if you're willing to, and let's see what we end up with as a group. So the question is, I was hired as an Agile project manager at a new company, and they're working mostly in Agile ways. What will my role be? I teach Scrum to newbies, and I get asked this. This is probably a top 3 question. And seemingly at first it's a super simple question to answer, but there's so many assumptions that are baked into or could be without the context. So I'm curious, what do you guys think?
And it would be helpful for me when I think of project manager. Are you thinking Scrum Master or product owner or product manager? If that distinction would be helpful to us.
Yes, and that's exactly why I'm asking this question because especially I work internationally. I teach over in Eastern Europe, so Agile in the past 20 years it has left Scrum a long time ago. There's so many variations as a hybrid that exists out there, and this is usually posed to me at the end of a talk or without the opportunity to delve into the context and unpack. And this is, I left it vague on purpose because this is usually how they throw it at me. And I have that, I used to say, hey, give me the context. I can't tell you without the context. And that also disappoints people. And so that's the trick part of it. I left it vague and open. And I'm hoping that actually might be helpful to some of you, because maybe some of you guys are wondering, maybe some of you guys are kind of dabbling on both ends of the spectrum, as many are nowadays, and that'll help us all learn from each other. Oh, Seth, that's a lot into the answer. So keep it coming, guys. We'll get to it in a second. We'll get to why I'm asking this question. So anybody willing to share their answer? Let's maybe take two people that are maybe passionate or willing to share in front of everybody on how they answer to themselves and why they answer that way.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Hi, this is Sunil. So yes, I answered it will certainly involve planning and leading a team, which is certainly a responsibility of the project manager. They're leaders, they do plan. So whatever role we are playing on the agile team, even if there's no context, I believe that these two things would certainly be my responsibility.
Thank you, Sunil. Good answer. Anybody else?
My response to this is Seth. First of all, you have to figure out the stance that the organization is, so you can know what does Agile mean to them. So you sort of have to do some sort of maturity assessment of some way, whether that's informal or formal. And then, at the regular roles of the coach, teaching the team what is Agile, then teaching the executives Agile, and then also consciously trying to not react viscerally when someone asks me for a RAG, a red, amber, green status, a PowerPoint, because that's just anti what you're trying to get to. But that's just me personally.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to pause the answers because I know there's a lot of us that have great answers. I see the answers keep coming. And the point of this was not so much to answer this question, but to show that it's very frequent in our workspaces to be asked questions related to roles and responsibilities, but frequently we're being asked without being told what the context around things are, who's the sponsor. All these things that you guys are mentioning are correct, and there's a slew of other things that affect this role and the context of this role, and it's so hard to answer. And oh, my clicker stopped working. Okay. Traditionally, there have been three ways to approach. And in my conversation with Bob, and thank you, Bob, for provoking me and for inviting me here to share this, there are basically three ways, more or less, to answer any kind of questions or examine any type of system around these questions. So the approaches are analytical solutions. So a lot of times the questions, you don't need to know project management, you don't need to know Agile. A great deal of the questions in our workspace are contextual, and they have to do with common sense. A lot of times they're common sense. A lot of times it's a matter of logic, but a lot of times, and our specific question is tied. I specifically very carefully chose Agile Project Manager to kind of live it out there right into that sliver and that space between Agile and project management. A lot of times things, roles and boundaries are tied around structures, very specific methods, whether it's project management, lean, Six Sigma, Agile, frameworks, metaphors, tools. These are all structures that are created to help us navigate things. So somebody rightfully said, oh, is this Scrum? Is this not Scrum? It's a lot easier because Scrum is what, 10, 12 pages. You go look up and you can easily say, hey, there really isn't an Agile project manager on here. Tell me more about your context on why you think there is, and you kind of start the conversation and you figure things out. Sometimes things are very complex. Sometimes things are very out there and not our question. Our question is fairly simple, but you can get to systemic coaching. And this is why I keep putting Lisa's book, because she has a bunch of methods out there. And so Lisa's journey went from a person who is experienced, expected to know and provide the answers, That's the stereotypical consultative stance, if you will. And she transitioned into somebody who started using structures and teaching, or using the structures instead of directly providing the answer. But she simply, not simply, but she eventually got into that space where the questions are very systemic and very complex. And she used systemic coaching, more holistic, big approaches to answer questions. And here comes BART. My approach to using, and this is part of my application for certified team coach through the Scrum Alliance. My journey was very similar to Lisa's. I used a lot of common sense at the beginning and kind of dabbled. As I learned more about the specific frameworks, I incorporated different pieces into navigating and answering. And eventually, when I started working with bigger and more complex organizational systems, where some parts of the organizations were working purely with project management, there's a lot of hybrid, there's a lot of purists, agile. Some teams are working in lean ways, in Kanban ways, just all these different flavors, and they're intersecting all over the place. I started getting these heuristics and using these more complex, holistic ways of thinking about the organization to be able to navigate. And my journey evolved to the point where I started getting hungry about more methods so that I can do the holistic thing and kind of, it's almost like you're parachuted into a company and you have seconds, if not minutes, maybe hours to figure out what is going on and plug yourself in. And so I was craving for a method that would help me observe quickly and figure out what is going on around me and give me that 360 as soon as possible. And that's how I stumbled onto BART. I had no idea what these conferences that I was talking about earlier were. All I did is I stumbled upon ways of figuring out roles. And as I read more about it, I found out that BART is an acronym for 4 elements of group analysis. And when I say group analysis, don't think psychology, just think a bunch of people and figuring out what the heck is going on amongst them. BART is an example of readily useful constructs that tend to be consistently present in study and learning from the group relations perspective. So yes, BART nails down things pretty good, like boundaries. It's not esoteric. Authority, we know who the boss is at all times. Subconsciously, as people, we have 2 people in an elevator. Our preservation instinct automatically makes us wonder, does this person outrank me? Are they stronger? Do they have more influence than me? No matter what we do, that's always going in the back of our mind. It's primal for us. Roles are extremely important. I threw a role in my sample question, but I didn't have context. So roles are great, but what framework are we using? What method are we using? Roles are contextual as well. And then we have the task. At the end of the day, why are we here? What are we here to do? The application of these insights that come out of the BART method is of particular interest to managers and executives, but it will probably have value to, I don't know, anybody who works in an organization, participates in work groups, or is on a professional team. So you're probably wondering, this is all good stuff, Matt, but why should we care about BART? Work is hard to perform in groups when everything is a negotiation. And that's the hard part. A lot of the modern methods, it's all about autonomy, it's all about letting people figure out. And then when authority gets a little bit pulled back and it's not as clear, fuzzy definitions for BART's elements, and by that I mean boundaries, authorities, role, and task, can lead to huge amounts of waste. Waste in any way you want it. Human waste, waste in relations, waste in the traditional 7 types of waste in lean, in any way you can have it. Ground rules strongly influence culture. So nowadays it's all about the culture of the companies. So yes, culture is the touchy-feely, but we still need to navigate culture some ways. And BART is one fantastic way to navigate it. BART helps you understand both yourself and the group that you're part as a whole, and also that complexity, all these weird things that we don't know what the heck just happened in that conference room between these people. You pick up BART, you start going through the different pieces. Eventually you have a high chance of hitting onto something there. And I love Bart Simpson. Maybe subconsciously I like Bart because of Bart Simpson. I'm gonna play a video and you guys let me know if you can hear the sound or not, because it's one of the distinguished members of the open space and agile community as a whole, Daniel Mezick. He explains Scrum in terms of BART, and whether you care about Scrum or not, I just want you to see somebody who's used group relations and BART for a while kind of ruminate and find a way to explain why we care about BART and how we can use it in frameworks. So I'm going to play the video clip here. I'm sharing my sound. Somebody can give me a heads up. Can you guys hear it?
No.
No?
Yeah, no sound.
in three
No.
roles. We could think of it as an
Now it's
authority
coming on.
distribution schema.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah. The sound
Okay,
is coming.
so
Could you go ahead and expand it to full screen, Matt?
Scrum is a system of decision rights in three roles. We could think of it as an authority distribution schema. Okay, so when you use Scrum, here's what you're doing. You're saying the way we make decisions around product and value creation isn't really working for us, or if it is working, we want it to work better. And we're going to set aside what we were doing before because we're not satisfied with the results. And we're going to drop in Scrum, and we're going to use the Scrum decision rights to produce more value faster with happier people. Okay. That's the idea with Scrum. So if you do really, really good Scrum, the thing I'm about to say is definitely true. If your Scrum is good, very good, or great, then you have fully implemented the decision rights as described in the Scrum guide. Okay? So Scrum is a system of decision rights in three roles. And here's the secret of all the bad Scrum that's going around. You can do the full Scrum without the decision rights, all the roles, all the events, all the artifacts, most of the rules. But if you don't implement the decision rights, you're still going to get a 10 to 15% improvement in everything you're measuring. And that's good enough for most companies. They're very happy with that. And
which is pretty sad.
It's pretty sad, right? And but here's the kind of odd beauty of it. They don't really have to change anything about how decisions are made in the company to get that 10 or 15%. They just have to pay attention to the detail a little more, and that's what they're doing when they bring in Scrum. We might call it Scrum Butt.
Yeah.
You know, the Scrum Butt that we've always heard about for the past decade. All that is a Scrum without the decision rights, because the decision rights are the hardest thing to implement in Scrum. Okay, now here's the next thing, and it relates to culture. I can change the culture of a corner of an organization or the entire organization in 3 days. Culture change is ridiculously simple. This is the thing I understand now, 11 years later after writing this book. Okay, and here's the secret. All you have to do if you want to change the culture is change the way decisions are made and who makes them. That's all you have to do.
Okay, and the purpose of me was not to trump Scrum and not to talk about Scrum and about Scrum being wrong or right. I just wanted to give you guys an example of somebody who dug deeper into the rules of what makes a framework or work management framework, whether it's project management, whether it's a framework like in Agile framework like Scrum. There is definitely these pillars that make the rules, and one of the most important things within a method is the decision-making powers, basically decision making is a mix of authority and a role. Who says and how much power do they have? And that is a constant. And I agree with Daniel that what makes Scrum special is not so much the, well, all the elements are important, otherwise they wouldn't be there, obviously. But behind the scenes, if we boil it down, ultimately the power of Scrum and what it comes down to is these decision-making rights. In project management, we have the stakeholders, we have the management. More or less, as you guys all know, things cycle through the project management. That's the great equalizer. The project manager helps coordinate all these things. In Scrum, it's very decentralized, and that's why we have all these, it's 3 roles, but these 3 roles are constantly juggling that authority and figuring out who is authorized to do what. And that's why Scrum is so particular and so specific, and it's good to be executed in a particular way. And so until I saw BART really made me re-examine both project management and the different agile methods out there. So BART is an acronym for the 4 elements of group analysis. It's an example of readily useful constructs that tend to be consistently present in study and learning from the group relations perspective. The application of these insights of particular interest to managers and executives, but BART can be used by anybody. And oh, it started playing again. My apologies. So what are boundaries? Boundaries basically are a container for work. We talk about boundaries without even realizing it when we define a culture. I know Bob and I have had countless discussions, but I'm sure all of you guys in your own way talk about define cultures as rigid, stiff, flexible, fluid, variable, great, bad, good, ugly. In a context, group culture is defined largely by the styles of boundaries that group uses. And boundaries can be many different ways. Time. In Agile, we have the time boxes. In project management, we have the deadlines, and they drive a whole of a lot. It's a major part of the method. Territory. Right now, there's a war about to break in Eastern Europe. Territory and boundaries are extremely important. Who crosses first, right? Who flinches? Resources. How much money do we have? So there are boundaries of all types, whether we are aware or not. But when we think in terms of boundaries and we call out, we're going to start seeing a whole lot of boundaries. And boundaries are important because there are red lines all around us in business. And sometimes they're formal, sometimes they're informal and invisible. So it's important to see these boundaries. Then we have authority. Sorry, my computer is a little slow. Factors influencing authority are varied, and all the factors may not be apparent, and the person taking up the authority may not be aware of them. Things like, what do you think they think? What they think you think. Desires, fears, effects of these factors. Authority is a very complex, and because there's so much informal authority in business nowadays, it's so important to navigate it and try to understand it and dig deeper and truly incorporate yourself and figure out the social and the political environment that you work in. So you figure out all the different ways in which authority is coming from. And I know some of the best project managers out there are extremely good at this, figuring out how authority flows and where it's coming from. And they're quick to intercept and help manage and coordinate it. So a lot of admiration. I think project managers is perhaps the role that is extremely suited out there in the work landscape in dealing with authority. How about roles? Roles, clear role definitions with non-fuzzy clear boundaries are required. Scrum, a lot of hoopla about these true roles, big definitions, but they're coined pretty well, and it helps these people kind of focus and gives them that focus and that room to navigate with fair certainty within the framework. Of course, there's some baked in tensions, but roles always have authority and associated boundaries. So all the elements of BART are related. Previous roles inform new roles, role transitions. We always hold multiple roles. I'm a father, husband, agile coach, and a bunch of other things all at the same time that influence each other nonstop. This is the reason why go-getters and heroes that ignore boundaries do not fit in an agile environment usually, because the role is just way out there and blows the lid on everything for everybody. In Agile, we touch heavily upon roles when we introduce cross-functionality. So that's one of the heaviest things when you transition from anything different than agility into Agile, because roles and that cross-functional skill set is extremely important out there. So task, what is the task? Task is maybe one of the harder things to define as part of BART, but we all do this, by the way. Baggage, we reenact of previous wins and losses in executing tasks. Curious and often dramatic reenactments of past
Your slide
experience.
didn't advance, Matt.
I'm sorry?
The slide didn't advance. There it
Oh,
is. Okay,
yep.
thank you.
There's a little bit of a delay and my clicker is not always collaborating, so I apologize for that. But task is the actionable item that we take, and task is very much tied to the roles, authority, and the boundaries that we work with. BART is very simple, but as you start working with it, even with the 4 factors, it's a fairly complex system that you can navigate and work around it. And so I'm gonna pause here in a little bit, but going back to the original question that I posed for you guys. The Agile project manager at a new company, and they're working mostly in Agile ways. What will my role be? So before I even ask, hey, what type of Agile are you doing? Or is it a project management? And you guys kind of are just introducing Agile now. But before all of this, if there isn't a clear answer, I might kind of do a little bit of digging here and there to help them unpack and understand their context. But if I'm not getting enough, if the person is brand new and they say, well, I think we're doing Scrum, but we're not doing Scrum. Oh, maybe we're doing Kanban, maybe this, that, and the other. I would say, what are the boundaries? Where is the authority coming from? Is the team self-sufficient? In Agile, we talk about empowerment. Is the team empowered to make its own decisions, and therefore the authority is contained within the team? Okay, that's a different thing. Now we can start examining how things work in this company. Is that authority influenced frequently by managers? Are they challenging the team's authority of self-management? Okay, looks like that boundary there, authority is crossing the boundary of the team easily. Okay, maybe the context is shifting a little bit, and an Agile project manager is a more traditional environment than that meets the eye, even though the company professes that it's practicing Agile. And then I would go back and say, well, before you got hired, the role, you were probably given a definition of the role. So what is the authority of the Agile project management's role there? Are you doing coordination work? Are you literally managing on a portfolio level? Like all these different things that can be related to project manager. Go back into answering the question. So why I'm bringing all of this up is BART is extremely simple, but just navigating to these 4 elements, just about any question out there in work management, it helps us unpack and navigate around. And sometimes we have structures. If they say, hey, we're following strictly Scrum, and Bob and I have this conversation all the time at work. Okay, we are officially as a division, as a business unit, supposed to follow Scrum. So all the boundaries, roles, everything is predefined because Scrum is very clear about how these roles are defined. Let's start with that as a starting point and move towards where we think the discussion is going, or the problem of the day that we're solving. But a lot of times in the company, things are wide open. It's a lot more ad hoc. There isn't even project management. There isn't Agile. Things are a little bit open. And then it's extremely helpful to have a small system like BART to ask the right questions and figure out where these boundaries lay, who has what authority, how that authority is distributed between the different roles, and how are tasks to be done, and how are tasks and things, the things we always did, and habits affecting all of these elements. And I'm going to pause here and take a couple of questions. How does this sit with you guys? Do you guys have a simple system like this to help you navigate in a new environment or existing environment? I've grown accustomed to using BART so much that when I go to a meetup, whether it's project management or agile, it's become my default thing to wonder about the BART elements and how they fit before I answer the question to myself quick. But how about you guys? What do you guys use out there? Rajesh says observation. Yeah, this is great. Observation is an intake of the information. How do you make it systematic? How do you kind of plug in all the... Larry says I use
Jay Galbraith.
Okay.
So he has a model. It looks like a star, and it's got strategy, structure, processes, rewards, and people. So I think there's a lot of overlap, Matt. I think, it's the same pie. I think he slices it into a few different slices, again, with the idea that each of those pieces connects to each other.
Now you got me curious, Larry. I'm definitely going to check it out. I see Will, who is a colleague of my wife's in the emergency management. My wife is an emergency management coordinator. And my beautiful bride of 2 years. Today is our anniversary. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Incident command system. I'm going to dig in and find out from my wife what that is all about.
Yeah, it's very structured. So it takes people from different law enforcement, emergency management, military, homeland security, all law enforcement, and brings them into one role where you actually have to cover your rank. And based upon the role that you play and the authority that you're given, you have specific things to play so that everyone knows exactly where to be, what tasks they're doing, and who to report to. And it takes a lot of variables and gets everyone in one working environment. And it's really, really interesting.
Wow, that is interesting. And
especially when you have a very high-ranking person have to cover their rank, and someone who's very junior, maybe in their first 4 years, is telling them what to do.
And I know we're running on time, so I'm gonna make a quick comment. Sunil says questions mostly about the process, including R&R, including decision making. So Sunil, in my context of BART, you're focusing on the task. You're basically asking a lot of questions to build context around the task.
You're right.
We also have list of exception scenarios which help me understand it better. Okay. I interrupted somebody. Go ahead. Great. Well, I'll respect the time box here of our gracious host that were willing to have me over. I'm so grateful to maybe bring something new to the community and just another method for you guys to dabble with. That is super simple. There's plenty of literature out there that is free and available on BART. And I'm very grateful for you guys to have such an engaged audience that is willing to participate. And for the platform, and I want to extend an offer. Anybody who's interested, very few people in our work community outside of psychologists and the CIA types in Agile and project management are working with BART and group relations. So I'd be more than happy if there's interest out there. Please come and find me. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. I'd be more than willing to dabble with you guys as a group and see how BART can help us even more. Out there. And with this, I'll pass it back to John and Bob.
Thank you, Matt. It was a great presentation. Hopefully everybody got some really great insights as far as what BART is. And again, on behalf of the PMI New Jersey community, we wish you a very happy anniversary.
you.